I think we'll make a start. I'd like to welcome everybody to this launch of a new research report entitled Demanding the Impossible, Platinum Mining Profits and Wage Demands in Context. My name is Gavin. I'm a senior researcher in the Society Work and Development Institute, that's SWOP, which is based here at the University of Witwatersrand, and we have the pleasure and the privilege of hosting this event. I will be chairing. The panel that we have with us today are the two authors of the report, Andrew Bowman, a visiting researcher from the Centre for Research on Socio-Cultural Change at the University of Manchester, who is currently based here at Wits in the Political Studies Department, and Gilad Isaacs, a PhD student at SOAS, that's at the University of London, and a part-time researcher in the Corporate Strategy and Industrial Development Unit, that's the CSID, here at Wits. The majority of what we will be doing will of course be the authors presenting their report, presenting their findings, and they're going to have about 20 minutes to do so. Copies of the report have been made available to you as an initial black and white copy. Those are in the packs in front of you, you should all have one. But it will also be available both on the SWOP website as from the end of today, certainly by Monday, and also available on the CRSC change, that's Press Change Drive, that's Andrew's website at the University of Manchester. So they will have 20 minutes then to speak, and we're also very honoured and privileged to have with us on the panel the Right Reverend Joe Seoka. Joe is the Bishop of the Anglican Diocese of Pretoria and also President of the Benchmarks Foundation. And as many of you will know, Bishop Joe has been a long-term advocate for social justice on the Platinum Belt and around the platinum mining industry, and amongst many other important types of interventions. That includes being involved in the brokering of a settlement of the Longmen dispute in 2012. Whether the workers ever actually saw the money from that settlement, we're not quite sure, but anyway, Bishop Joe was involved in brokering that. And he is going to give us some thoughts, some reactions to what he hears about this from this report, how it fits into what is happening with the wage dispute now, and the broader state of the mining industry. Just before we begin, I should say as well that we will then go to a question and answer session, but just before then, of course, this is not just about facts and figures and data. Standing behind this is an absolutely massive now humanitarian catastrophe on the Rustenburg Platinum Belt. So we also want to give a platform after Bishop Joe has spoken to Trevor Ngwani from the Gauteng Miner Support Committee to talk about the solidarity work they are doing and how you can also be involved. Then we'll go to questions and answers. The authors, Andrew and Gilad, kindly asked me to make just a couple of introductory comments, and I want to keep those very brief because theirs is the main business of the afternoon. Really just to say three things. The first is, after getting into 5 months of this strike now, the positions actually seem as far apart as ever. There have been 3 different attempts at negotiation, first with the CCMA, secondly with the Labour Court, and now with the Interministerial Task Team, which has been headed by the new Minister of Minerals and Resources. And at this point it appears still the positions remain a fair distance apart. Now, leading to the second point, and this is the key thing, underlining those distance between positions is an argument which has been put forward by the employers from the beginning, which is essentially the basic pay wage demand of 12,500 rand on the part of AMCU and its members is unaffordable. And in fact, not only have they said that it's unaffordable, but in what is portrayed as a current crisis of profitability in the platinum mining industry, were that demand to be met, then this would basically spell the end of that industry. And this idea has become essentially as natural as the weather. It's been picked up by every single media outlet, by every single commentator, by government institutions, and even by some unions. The idea that the 12,500 demand is demanding the impossible and is actually a threat to the mining industry and a threat to the economy. The image often implicitly, but nevertheless there, is on the one side, we have the rationality of the mainly white mining employers saying what really can be done and what can't be done in a modern economy, versus the irrationality of the almost black mine workers who are demanding a living wage. That is the image which has dominated the debate since the strike began on the 23rd of January. And there has been very, very little to challenge that assertion within the public realm to date. That's one point. Then attached to that is the second, because this is about figures and this is about numbers. On the side of AMCU, the negotiators there, a continual complaint from the point that the negotiations have begun with the CCMA all the way up until today is actually that the employers have not been forthcoming with the detailed data which is necessarily to break down and sensibly talk about what would be the cost to company of different combinations of the way that the wage demand could be met or compromises could be made. And that remains the case up to date. To his credit, Minister Ramachodi, when he took over the department and got this interministerial task team going, said that the employers must actually completely open up their books to all parties so that a sensible and rational and agreed decision can be reached. My understanding is that they've not done that yet, and I think it will be the test of the interministerial task team, if it's an honest broker, that it actually makes them do that, because without that happening, it's really hard to see how assessment can really happen. The employers can keep on saying they can't afford it. They need to show why they can't afford it. This then leads me to today's report, because this is a report by two comparatively young researchers, and they have done what really should have been done a long time ago, which is they have looked systematically at the data which is available within the public domain. And having Bishop Joe on the panel, I can't help but think of a biblical analogy, which is really that of David and Goliath. Because on the one hand, you have the Goliath of the mining corporations, with their massive machinery of accountants and PR people who are making sure that a particular line of understanding and argument dominates the public domain, that hegemonizes the debate. But on the other hand, you have two researchers with comparatively few resources who have worked furiously to produce a report from the available data which actually suggests a very different picture. And perhaps this will prove to be the stone which hits between the eyes the affordability argument which the employers have been putting forward. I just want to emphasise finally, before they present their findings, that this is an independent piece of research. Whoever's position may or may not be supported by the findings, the fact is that Andrew and Gilad have done this report independently of any interest group or advocacy group. They've taken the data, they've seen it, they've worked through it objectively, and also as well, I should stress that this is an interim report. It is part of a larger research process, but they wanted to get these figures out there into the public domain so that we can have actually a much better public debate until we've had up until now. We owe them a great service, and it's an honour to be able to host them today. I'll give you Gilad and Andrew.
Okay then, 10 minutes. And then I'll switch over to Gilad. So I wanted to start with a couple of qualifications about the report, about what it does do and what it doesn't. What it doesn't do is provide what we consider a definitive answer to this question of wage affordability. That would require pretty complex modelling of future supply and demand relating to platinum group metals and costs on the mines. It doesn't contain that. It also doesn't provide a comprehensive overview of all the issues in the platinum sector. That would require a book or two, not an interim report. what it does seek to do is to provide a bit of historical context on the value, the economic value produced by the three major platinum producers, which we felt was somewhat lacking in a lot of the public debate at the moment. And we wanted to set the wage demands made by AMCU within this historical context. So why worry about this context? Well, our motivation for this report was essentially that we felt that certain sets of data in the public debate were being foregrounded at the expense of others. And in particular, when you look at the main source of information used by the media, the Platinum Wage Negotiations website, you've probably all seen it with the ticking clock of revenues lost to the company and wages to miners. It frames the issue within an incredibly narrow time period of the last couple of years. It looks at the mining companies and says, well, hey, we're making enormous cash losses, wages and salaries are eating up all our profits, how can they possibly grow anymore? It's not false, but it is quite selective, because again, it's only viewing the platinum industry over a very short time period. So let's look at some of the longer term trends. Well, first of all, skirting quickly over the platinum price, it's a cyclical industry. From 2000 to 2008, there was an enormous boom. The price jumped, and platinum companies made a lot of money. It should be stressed that this isn't a result of any special innovation or skill on the part of the platinum company. It's a kind of rent derived from the scarcity of platinum. Where's the price going to go? Well, this will be a key determinant of what's affordable and what's not in the years ahead. As I said, we don't attempt to model this in this report, but it's worth pointing out that there are divided opinions on this. Again, the Platinum Wage Negotiation website paints a very bleak picture about increasing rates of recycling, sluggish demand in the Eurozone, but opinions are quite mixed. So many analysts see a brighter picture for demand going forward, and these quotes we've just taken recently from key executives at two of the platinum companies, who both are saying that they expect demand to increase and prices to go up. So this is why we think it's necessary to take a very long-term view when you're looking at the platinum sector, to look at what happens during periods of high profitability as well as periods of low profitability. Going back to look at how well the platinum companies performed, this is just to stress that while platinum companies look like they're in incredible difficulty at the moment, for a very long time this was a very lucrative business to be involved in. This chart shows their operating profit margins for the three main companies set against the JSE average and median, all much higher up until the bust. And this looks at return on investment, which is the amount, in this case, calculated by free cash flow created over capital expenditure. And this was on the recommendation of one of the authors of the ANC commissioned Strategic Interventions in the Mining Sector report. What that report said was that a threshold, a maximum threshold rate of return using this measure should be about 15%. And as you can see here, mining companies for large periods of time were making well in excess of that. I should say that the 15% threshold they suggested, above which you tax returns at quite a high rate. So there's another lens though with which we can look at the profitability of the mining companies, which is perhaps a bit more useful when we're thinking about issues of distributional justice, which have been at the heart of what's been going on in the platinum belt in recent years. So what we've done is a bit of a value-added distribution. So for those who aren't familiar with it, I mean, a simple way of defining value-added is the money left with a producer of a good or services after they've paid for external purchases used in production. So in this case, we've calculated it with profits before tax, added to labour costs, added to depreciation and interest costs. That's the kind of a very broad definition of the value which a company creates. And then there are then three competing claims as to what happens to that value. You have a claim from labour in terms of wages, you have a claim from the owners of the company in terms of profits, and you have a claim from the state in terms of taxation on those profits. And the relative bargaining power of these three broad groups determines how things get broken up. Okay, so let's think about this as how the pie gets divided. And in this case, what we've done is added up the totals for the three major companies, and we've worked out the different percentage shares over three different time periods. The boom period, 2000 to 2008, the bust period, 2009 to 2013, and for the entire 14-year period there, which I should say we use simply because this was the earliest we could get full annual reports from the websites of all the three producers. But it's a neat way of doing it, we think, because it covers two periods of very contrasting fortunes. So although the public discourse has generally been about greedy workers kind of taking up all the company's money, what you can see when you look at, certainly for the 2000 to 2008 period, is that the labour share of value added, the red slice of the pie, is very small. And it was smaller than anything I'd really seen for other industries where I've done this type of analysis. And we had a look at the OECD data, comparing it to the average labour share of gross value added across the OECD countries and for South Africa, which over this period is about 50%. So it's high by any standards. What you see, obviously, is, I think this is my phone doing that. What you see, obviously, during the bust period is labour's share increasing. Wages were increasing during this period, but the primary reason is just because the pie is shrinking. Now, it's worth looking at these company by company and year by year, which we have in the appendix of the report if people are interested. And it's worth pointing out as well that there are differing fortunes between the companies, certainly in the bust period, with Lonmin doing a lot worse than the others. But nonetheless, we think it's a kind of a useful illustration to this question about who gets what within the mining industry within different periods of time. And another point to make is what happens to the profits achieved. So going back in 2000 to 2008, you can see the kind of the dark blue triangle at the bottom. That's the amount of profits which was distributed as dividends, 28% of the total value added created by the industry taken out as dividends. Again, this is comparing distributions to shareholders as a percentage of gross value added compared to data from the SARB on averages, and they're doing well above. It's a very lucrative industry, and a lot of this is going out to foreign shareholders as well. When you look at the list of top 100 shareholders for Lonmin, for example, you see not just all the major foreign banks and investment vehicles, but you also see things like the State of California pension fund and the government of Norway and the Merseyside pension fund. This is money which is going out of South Africa. And just to kind of put it in fairly stark contrast, this was for Amplats over the boom period, the money which went to their shareholders and the money which went to Labour. Very similar amount. Impala, they gave more money to their shareholders than they gave to their workforce. Longmen, it's a different picture, as I said, but it's still high And the big question, I guess, is could they have made done with any less than this? Could they have given a bit more of their distributions to shareholders, to workers who are living in pretty dire poverty? So why does this context matter? Because, I mean, after all, you could say that the profits are gone, they can't be clawed back, and it's hugely uncertain whether there ever will be a boom period similar to 2000 to 2008. It matters firstly because these issues about distributional justice and pay differentials within the mining companies have been a key catalyst of strike action. It also shows some of the roots of the discontent with the NUM. You look at these years where the labour share of value added within these companies is incredibly low. Wage rises could have been accommodated quite easily, and you're thinking, well, what were the NUM doing during this period? Thirdly, because it raises the question about could South Africa have got more from this during the last boom period? And then could it get more in future periods of high profitability if they return? And what policies are being discussed to make sure that this does happen? And with that, I'll pass over.
Thanks.